Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Human Rights, the show in which we discuss all things related to human rights. I'm your host, John Allender, and I'm part of the California chapter of Youth for Human Rights International. Youth for Human Rights International's purpose is to enlighten and educate people around the world on what their human rights are, with specific focus on the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And with this education to enable and inspire the youth of today as our leaders of tomorrow, to stand up and secure these rights for themselves and all people on earth. For each show, we like to take up one right and try to broaden your understanding of how this right is important to you and your loved ones. For today's show, we will be looking at human right number 26, the right to education. Education is a right. Primary schools should be free. You should learn about the United Nations and how to get along with others. Our parents can choose what we learn are some of the basic ideas of this right. Let's take a look at a short video about this specific human right.
Now, Krista, make sure you stay with her the whole time. She's new to the country. This is her first day. This is a brand new country. It's a whole different culture.
Gonna be okay.
But now make sure you stay with her the whole time. I'll be here right after school to pick you up.
Okay, Mom.
Okay, have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ignore my mom. She's so annoying. She's totally freaking out about this whole thing. She freaks out about everything. She always does that. Ugh. Ignore my mom. So, you ready for your first day in the wicked castle of doom? I mean, like, seriously, it's so boring. I don't know how they could put us through this, like, every single day. How many schools do you have in your village? None.
All right, let's examine these ideas a little more closely. The United Nations Declaration says, everyone has a right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. It goes on to say, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Thirdly, it says, parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Education has been with us for as long as we have been a species. There has never been a time when human beings were not educating other human beings. It could be as simple as what to eat or how to wash your hands, or as complex as learning astrophysics or how to perform a heart transplant. It is easily observable that where good education exists, the individual has opportunity, and the society moves forward with their stated goals. And where education is hard to come by, a society stagnates and a feeling of hopelessness pervades the future generation. Education is not a single thing, nor does it come from a single source. First, there's the education your parents and grandparents passed down, which is mostly cultural. Culture has to do with your religious beliefs, morals, race. It is a broad subject where we all learn our family history, their achievements and their failures, and the lessons they learn from those experiences. Learning about your own culture helps you to understand other people. Every person comes from a particular culture. There are as many cultures on earth as there are places to live. Then there is formal education or schooling, learning the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic. These basic subjects are the foundation that almost all future education is built on. Being able to read and comprehend a book, write out an answer, and do simple, basic arithmetic are needed to assimilate any technical skill. There's another basic skill that should be included with these three, and that is how to research a subject. With these four areas intact, an individual can eventually champion any subject. Next is specialized education in trades or college degrees, where the focus is not generalized but more specific. On-the-job education is another, being shown what to do while actually doing it. I am sure there are as many more categories that could be listed. In today's world, the cornerstone of education is literacy, the ability to read and comprehend what you are reading. Another important aspect of education is the ability to then go out and look for yourself to see if what you have read is true. This ability brings about certainty, and certainty, not data, is knowledge. One thing education is not is indoctrination. Indoctrination could be defined as telling someone the way things are without inviting them to look for themselves and decide if it was true. Part of a good education is learning how to look, learning how to affirm that what you were being taught was true. With literacy intact, the individual is not confined to the classroom or beholden to an institution. With literacy, there is freedom to continue one's education into anything that the individual considers important. With literacy, you can expand upon what you have learned. There is another very important aspect to education, and that is how education promotes equality. I think if you carefully look at inequality, you would find that the root cause was the inequality in education. It may not be apparent at first, but people that are better educated on how a society works, how the things they own work or are made, why rules are the way they are, and how the government works and how to change it, have an easier time in our society. They understand how finances and money works, the math behind loans and interest payments, and have a basic understanding of the math when they are less likely to have been, and they are less likely to be taken advantage of. Those that are not educated do not understand the agreements or how things work and are much more likely to be made into victims of all the complexities of society. They will take a job not realizing it won't cover their actual expenses, or take a loan that they cannot afford to repay. They can be more easily be taken advantage of by an unscrupulous person. These are the symptoms of an inequality. Behind these symptoms is a bad or missing education. While education alone cannot solve all social inequalities, it is a powerful tool for the promoting equal opportunity, social mobility, and a more inclusive society. By investing in quality education and ensuring equal access for all societies can work towards reducing disparity and fostering a more equitable future. It is no different today than it was in the past. If you go back 200 years ago, people had to learn how to tell good water from bad water, how to stay clean without running hot and cold water, how to navigate, how to ride a horse. The difference is most of the things they could learn at home from their parents and grandparents. As society has advanced, it has become more dependent upon educational institutions. My guest today is Baiyewu of Global Rights. Abi was named one of the most 100 influential civil society leaders in Nigeria in 2021. And her organization, Global Rights, are intent on bringing human rights to Nigeria and Africa. Welcome, Abi.
Thank you for having me, John.
All right, so tell me about the purpose of Global Rights and what you do there.
Well, Global Rights is a human rights capacity building organization. We build capacities of communities and activists around the world, working with them side by side, amplifying voices at the grassroots and equipping them with basic skills and knowledge on human rights.
Great. So when you say you're building capacity, what do you mean by that?
So we would train communities on their rights, would train them on how to hold governments accountable, would train them on collaborative problem solving, would do the same with government, and then create platforms for those collaborative problem solving.
And so what kind of difficulties you mainly work in Nigeria, right?
That's correct.
And what kind of trouble are you running into with human rights there?
Oh, there are lots of troubles with human rights. First, we work on issues of security and human rights. As you know, Nigeria has been on the violent extremist index is one of the top 5 countries for a very, very long time. And so there's a lot of security issues and human rights issues along with security issues in Nigeria. We work on human security and access to remedies in the country, working with mining host communities on climate change and equitable resource governance in Nigeria, and work on civic space strengthening.
Okay, great. Now, do you work mainly in the school systems? Or are you working with the government or civil society?
Largely with civil society and with communities, with indigent communities, communities impacted by mining, with community-based organizations, building the capacity of community-based organizations. And yes, we do work with government. So, for example, we do a lot of work with the National Human Rights Commission, with the Ministry of Mines and Steel, development in the country, with coalitions and with the business sector as well, especially when we work on equitable resource governance, on mining or on business and human rights.
Okay, great. Now, what are you particularly working on right now? I mean, you're working on, I know I read some of the materials that you sent me, and I guess there was quite a few young women that were taken advantage of and kidnapped and taken across borders. Is that something you're currently working on?
Well, it's something that we do work on. Working that would fall under our security and human rights program. And under that program, you have two core things: the rights of civilians in armed conflict, and there's quite a bit of armed conflict going on in Nigeria, and also sexual and gender-based violence. We consider those security issues. And so the rights of women caught up in armed conflicts in the northwest and in the northeast of the country are major things that we continue to advocate about. Internally displaced women as well are particularly vulnerable to rights violations. And so, yes, we do work with a lot of them on these issues. We work on, like I said, we work with mining host communities, and that's one of my favorite groups to work with. There's a lot of mining that goes on in West Africa and also in Nigeria. While Nigeria is not a major mining destination, there are lots of rights violation of mining host communities. And our inroad into mining host communities, working with mining host communities, has started in 2011 at the peak of the gold mining related lead poisoning that was going on in the northwest of the country, specifically in Zamfara state, where Nigeria lost more than 700 children to gold mining related lead poisoning.
Oh my God, 700?
Yeah, and more than 700 children. And there was an attempt to treat it just as a public health problem. But the problem was it's more than a public health problem. It's a human rights problem. The rights of these communities needed to be respected, that there are regional instruments that protect the rights of mining host communities that are not being enforced, that the right to free, prior, informed consent was also not taken into account. So yes, we do a lot of work with mining host communities. We also, like I said, work on security and human rights, early warning, early response systems for communities, and building platforms for communities to engage with government in participatory governance. One of my other favorite work areas is on civic space strengthening. building the capacity of young people to know how to engage on human rights issues, communities as well, and building the resilience of activists, of civil society organizations, looking at legislation that that inhibit the work of civil society in the country, and training civil society organizations on compliance, assisting them with compliance, and creating platforms for them to talk with government on issues that inhibit compliance, and also just a basic clampdown on civic actors and activists, and helping civil society to navigate that in Nigeria.
All right, so when you're working with, evidently the mining is a very big commodity in Nigeria, and are they mostly using child labor up there, or what was the situation there?
Well, there's been child labor. There is child labor, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier about education. Now, Nigeria has the most number of out-of-school children in the world, 20 million children out of school. And children who are out of school don't just sit around.
Sure. Yeah.
They are, girls are getting married too early.
And how
And
old are they
girls
getting
and
married?
boys. Well, it depends on what part of the country. There, particularly in the north, you have girls marrying as early as 12, 13, and it's really basically linked to education. Now, if they stayed in school longer, then they would marry much later.
Sure.
Then we wouldn't even have as many women die from childbirth related complications, for example. Nigeria is also has the third highest number of women who die maternal mortality rates in the world.
Really?
And it's very easy to explain. If girls are getting married too early, their bodies are not ready to have babies. A lot of them will die trying to have babies. Whether you go to school, it affects your socioeconomic status, and that also affects maternal mortality. I know we were talking about mining, but then I've jumped to one of my favorite topics now.
Well, we'll get back to that
also
then.
affects
Let's come
maternal
back to that.
mortality. Yeah. Okay. That also affects maternal mortality. But then girls who are not in school and boys who are not in school will either be getting married or working. And so if they're working, there's also a very high likelihood you would find a number of them in the mines.
Okay.
And because there's a lot of informal mining, a lot of artisanal mining going on, yes, there are children working in the mines.
And what kind of jobs are they doing in the mine?
So you find they're crushing nuggets, for example, for artisanal gold mining, crushing nuggets, carrying rocks, crushed rocks, ferrying for stones. But it's largely the boys because of the high volume of violence as well on artisanal mining sites. But yes, you do have girls and young women at those sites as well.
So you said there's a lot of violence on the site.
There's a gender-based violence. It's very easy for gender-based violence to occur in informal mining sites, even in formal mining sites. And so yes, there is violence in those places. Yeah.
So
because sometimes there's drug use as well.
Oh, drug use, really? So I take it there's really no opportunity to further their education once they go to work in a mine.
Sometimes people work in the mines because they do want to further their education.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I'm reminded particularly of a young guy, a son we'd met in Zamfara, who was crushing gold nuggets at the site there. And I'd interviewed him and asked why are you doing this? You expect the basic, I need to make a living. And he said, look, I'm a student at a polytechnic, but I've not been able to pay my fees. And so I'm here seasonally. I come in during the school holidays. I crush the nuggets. I get them sold. And it pays for my tuition for the next semester. and I'm able to do odd jobs while I'm on campus and make some more money to be able to see myself through school.
Hmm.
And there are kids who do that. Some children go to school and then in the afternoons, and which is what happened in Zamfara State, would be with their parents to crush the nuggets, which is why a lot of children got the lead poisoning from the gold mining related lead poisoning that occurred in that state. So yes, sometimes it is so they can earn some money to go back to school.
Oh, that's great. So, I don't really quite understand the culture there. Is it unusual for people that young to be working that strenuous of a job, or is it or is it something that's happened recently that came about?
It's not unusual. Parents and children have always walked side by side,
Hmm.
but most of the people at mining sites are actually adults. But it's
Okay.
not unusual to have children work on mining sites or be engaged in activities to support their families, for example, uh, especially where there's poverty, livelihoods is not left to just parents and children work together to just be able to put something on the table.
Okay, great. And then with regards to the young women in the school system, what kind of structure does the school system have in Nigeria? I mean, is it well established, or is it just established from town to town and it's different everywhere? Or how's that set up?
Oh, it's well established. It's established from there's federal level of education and the state level. Most schools, most formal schools
Uh-huh.
are run by the state. There are also a lot of private schools because people also have a lot of concerns about the quality of education in public schools.
Yeah.
But public schools are run by the government,
Hmm.
and yeah, and it should be compulsory, but it is not.
Hmm.
So you have a lot of children who are not in schools. There are also communities where either school buildings do not exist or teachers are not available to teach children because of how very poorly teachers are paid. That also impacts education in those places. But
Sure.
there are public schools, they're run by government, and they're private schools.
Well, what percentage of the children have access to a public school?
It depends on which state you're talking about.
Hmm.
They should all have access to public schools.
Okay.
I think first, let me start by the kids who do not have access to public schools at all. Children living with disability often do not have access to public schools because the infrastructure, the the teaching programs to assist them navigate those schools do not exist. There are
Oh,
very few schools, and there's a tendency to segregate schools as well, so that you have school for the blind, school for the deaf, rather than have an integrated system.
right.
And in that system, you don't have sufficient schools. So in some state, maybe you have just a single elementary school or a single high school for the blind or the deaf. Um, and if you live too far away, you do not have the access to them, and so you do not go to school. There are also people who live with physical disability
Uh-huh.
who because they cannot access public transportation. Public transportation is another very big problem, and that they do not have facilities within the school buildings, are unable to access school. I'm also very concerned about children with learning disabilities, children with autism, and those type of people on the spectrum also have a very difficult time accessing public education. So starting with those are the people I think about the most when I think about lack of access to public education. Then I go on to poverty,
Uh,
children who live on less than $1 a day, and there are loads of them in Nigeria. Um, about 47% of the population in the country live below poverty lines. And when you don't know when you'll eat, it's not very likely you'll be thinking about schools. schools also come with a cost,
No.
even when they're public schools in Nigeria. You have to think about uniforms, about books, about being able to take lunch to school. And when parents are unable to
Uh-huh.
afford this, they would rather that the kids work with them, or they're just unable to send the kids and the kids stay back home. And that affects everything. And they miss school for a few days, will become a few weeks, will then
Right.
become missing an entire term, and then they don't go back to school.
Does the state provide most of school books and most of the materials that a student will need, or does the parent have to supply those?
Sadly, the parents have to supply
Oh,
those for most
really?
states. Yes, for most states, the parents have to supply those. So what the state would do is to provide the school building
Okay.
and furnishing for the schools, and sometimes not, and to provide teachers.
Uh-huh.
But largely, parents would need to provide uniforms, would need to provide books, would need to provide stationery, pack a lunch for your kid, or um, be able to give them a token for a school lunch. But
And I would
it,
imagine on a
yeah,
dollar a day, you're not got a lot of extra money to buy a spool book.
no, you don't have a lot of that.
Right. So how does this feather into with the young girls getting married so young? Is it usually the very impoverished young women that end up marrying at such a young age because they just can't stay in school because their parents can't afford them?
Largely impoverished young women. There is an element of culture to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people think that it is Islamic. It's Islamic culture for girls to get married young. But then again, we've dispelled this myth in a lot of places, pointing out to them that a lot of Muslim women marry much older. There are countries across the world, Muslim countries across the world, where um, there is a minimum age for marriage, and it's usually over 16 or over 18,
Uh-huh.
and that the laws insist on that. And we've been trying to get the Nigerian government to prescribe a minimum age for marriage for a while now. It's a journey. We'll get there.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a health issue as much as anything else when you're talking about young women dying in childbirth.
Yes, it is. One of the first things I learned about how education is a public health issue
Uh-huh.
was when I learned that the delaying the first onset of sexual encounter would cut a woman's chance of getting HIV by 50%. I
Wow.
thought, huh.
Yeah.
And that so if you keep girls in school for much longer, it's not very likely they will get HIV or any of the other venereal diseases. They will lead healthier and more productive lives. And so it all starts with education.
Sounds like you have to educate the parents on this also. Get them an understanding of what's best for their young daughter.
It's easier said than done in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So you need parents to have the capacity to do that. But the state has a larger role to play in this,
Okay.
because if you created um, uh, an enabling society that would enabling system that would enable girls and boys to be able to access education, whatever their status is, creating a more equitable society, um, taking out the inequity in access to education, then you would automatically reduce the number of girls who have to marry early.
Yeah.
20 million children, then they're not sitting around. Their parents are not particularly happy that their children are out of school, by the way, but they just don't have the capacity. If you live on less than $1 a day, there's very little you can do.
Right. Now, is there a big disparity between the major cities and the countryside in how this is applied?
Oh, yes, there is. So in the major cities like in Lagos, in the South in general, there's larger access to education.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the in the North, it's not as easy to access education as it is in the South. The inequity is not as pronounced in the South. The human development indicators in the South are much better than in the North. So, yes, it is worse in the North than in the South. In the city centers, people also have greater access to education. They're able to access schools. In the rural communities, sometimes children have to travel very long distances. Some of the communities in which we worked in, children walk an hour in the morning just to get to school and an hour back. That is long. I mean, they don't think about it.
Right?
But then where it's longer, where they have to to walk 2 hours, then it's very unlikely they will get to school. So you have some of them live with relatives in the next town if they have to work as long as 90 minutes or 2 hours to access school in the mornings.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Yeah.
how does your organization go about resolving this issue? What is your plan, or what are you trying to achieve, and how are you going about doing that?
So our core programming is not on education, but we always end up touching on education. One of the things we do as well is go into the communities, inform them of their rights, help them understand how to access their rights, and then create platforms for them to speak with government to co-problem solve together. If
Okay.
you end poverty, you will end the number of children who do not have access to education. You will end the number of girls who would die from childbirth-related complications or from diseases, or the number of children who die before the age of 5 if you end poverty. So one of the things is also helping government to see what their role is, and participatory governance on the part of citizens to be able to hold government accountable, is to say the bare minimum is to ensure that every child has at least basic education.
Okay, great. So, what kind of plans do you have in the future? What projects are you guys going to be working on soon?
One of the projects we're working on, which I'm really excited about, is called Sawubona. And it's a South African word for I see you. And it's really a project that amplifies the voices of invisible people. So
Mm-hmm.
people living, for example, in internally displaced people's camps, refugees, people living in abject poverty, people living with disability, just the general homeless people, just general
Yeah.
people that are considered, not considered, that we found to be invisible, uh, putting a spotlight on them and drawing them to the table to be part of the governance that pulls them out of invisibility, to be able, because the participatory governance is a critical part of Nigeria's constitution, which is often ignored, to get them to participate in governance as well. First, make them visible by amplifying their voices, and then getting them to the table as well. So I'm really excited about Sawubona. Like I said, Sawubona means I see you. And in the deeper sense of the interpretation of that word, it's I value what I see in you.
Wow. So, are you heading back to Nigeria soon to be working on that? Or are you out of the country for a little while? Or
Well, so yes, I work, I ricochet back and forth. Heading back soon, yes.
okay, great. So, of all the human rights that are out there, which ones do you find the most that you value the most?
The right to dignity.
Pardon?
The right to dignity.
Oh, wow. And tell me about that. What does that mean to you?
First, a wise woman told me once that um, the opposite of dignity is poverty.
Hmm.
that if we would treat every human being as human, if we will accord to them the respect and equitable treatment that they need to be part of society, then we will create a better society for us all. Then we'll all be safer. Then we'll all be better. Then the quality of our lives will be enriched.
Makes sense.
Too many people. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, I just said makes sense.
Yeah. So too many people are caught in traps that they didn't create because we just would not treat them as Homo sapiens sapien. According basic dignity to people will ensure the quality of their lives, will ensure the quality of our society as well, and not just of their lives, would ensure that we live healthier, stronger, better lives in all. So the right to dignity for me has always been the underlying value of all of the work that I do. And that everything the greatest impact we can do is to ensure dignity for all.
Fantastic. I love it. Great words. All right. So what's the next thing you're going to be working on?
Well, I think I've just spoken about it. Sawubona, I'm very excited about Sawubona. We still work with mining host communities across Nigeria, and that extends to Africa. Global Rights initiated the African Coalition for Corporate Accountability, which also holds a lot of mining companies, people, the corporations accountable for the atrocities that happen across the continent. In September this year, we will be hosting the West African Mining Host Communities in Daba, which is a gathering of mining host communities across West Africa to chart the part for the future that they envision and be part of actualizing the African mining vision and the ECOWAS mining directive. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Wow.
To be connected with old friends, yes, and the communities and making change happen. And it's the best part of our work is, sometimes it's so difficult because day to day you wonder how much impact you do make. It's just seeing those little wings every day, seeing those communities connected and seeing changes in the way governance is done. And yes, dignity.
Well, that's great. And I really appreciate you sharing your stories with us and letting us know what you're doing. I really appreciate what you are doing too, as far as bringing human rights to Nigeria and all of Africa. Thanks for coming on, and I hope to be hearing from you soon.
Thanks for having me, John.
Okay, great. Thank you, Abby. It was great talking to you today and hearing your story. Well, that's our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something new about such an important topic. As I interview all these wonderful and different guests and look at how they have taken the idea of universal human rights and employed it into their career or their hobby, I find it so inspiring. Then I wonder, what will you be doing with this information? How will you pass on this message? If you have an inspiring story, please let us know, and we will include it in our future shows. We have 31 wonderful videos in 17 languages on the Youth for Human Rights International website about each of the human rights and the history of human rights. You can watch each one of these and learn so much more about human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by going to yhri.org. If you have your own video about a human right that you've created, we would love to see them. If you would like to be a guest on our show or know someone whom you would like to be here, let us know and we will put them on. Email us at talkabouthumanrights@gmail.com. Once again, thank you to our guest, Abby. I'm John Allender, and I'll see you next week on Let's Talk About Human Rights.